Imagine digging a tunnel under a major city and discovering 1.5 million cubic meters of poisoned soil buried beneath your feet. That is exactly what happened in Melbourne, and it turned Australia's biggest road project into a toxic nightmare. This is the story of the Westgate Tunnel, a project that promised to fix Melbourne's worst traffic bottleneck with twin megatunnels and a new river crossing. But halfway through construction, workers uncovered something no one expected: PFAS forever chemicals. Invisible poison so dangerous the entire dig had to stop. What you are about to discover is how a $5.5 billion dream became a $12 billion disaster. How two giant tunnel boring machines, each weighing 4,000 tons, were frozen underground. How communities revolted, lawsuits exploded, and taxpayers were forced to pay nearly double the cost. You will see how Melbourne's answer to gridlock became a scandal of toxic accountability, political pressure, and a hidden poison under one of Australia's busiest cities. And through it all, engineers kept digging. Through protests, through shutdowns, through betrayal. By the end of this video, you will understand why the Westgate Tunnel is called Australia's most poisoned mega project, and whether saving 20 minutes of travel time was worth a toxic legacy that may never go away. Let's dive in. Back in 2014, Melbourne had a problem. The Westgate Bridge was drowning in traffic. Every day, over 200,000 cars and trucks crawled across it. Commutes turned into nightmares. Neighborhoods in the inner west were choking under gridlock. That's when a private toll road giant, Transurban, came forward with an idea. They pitched the Western Distributor. Later, it was renamed the Westgate Tunnel. And in December 2017, the Victorian government gave the green light. A $5.5 billion public-private partnership was born. For people in Melbourne's west, this wasn't just a road. It was hope. A chance to finally be connected. A chance not to be the forgotten side of the city anymore. The project would be paid for by extending Transurban's CityLink tolls all the way to 2045. Victoria's Parliamentary Budget Office calculated that this deal could generate nearly 37 billion Australian dollars in toll revenue by 2044 to 45. So while the government called it a $5.5 billion fix, the true cost was hidden. Over 3 decades, drivers would end up paying 7 times more. Think of it like buying a car. The sticker price says $30,000, but by the time you finish paying interest, you've spent $50,000. Only this wasn't a car. It was a tunnel. And the interest wasn't paid in money alone. It was paid in decades of tolls. But nobody was focused on that yet, because the real nightmare was still buried underground. So what exactly did that $5.5 billion promise to deliver? And why did Melbourne believe it was worth it? The pitch was bold. Build 2 giant road tunnels under the suburb of Yarraville, one outbound at nearly 4 kilometers, one inbound at 2.8 kilometers. Together, they would carry thousands of vehicles beneath the city every single day. But that was only the start. A brand new Maribyrnong River crossing was added to the plan. Plus, a 2.5-kilometer elevated road over Footscray Road, and the M1 freeway would be widened to take even more traffic. Officials made one big promise. More than 9,000 trucks a day would be taken off residential streets. For families in Melbourne's inner west, this sounded like freedom. No more trucks shaking the walls of schools. No more nights filled with the roar of engines. No more air clogged with diesel fumes. Cleaner streets, quieter neighborhoods, safer children. The government promised something else too. A commute that once took an hour could now be cut down by 20 minutes. On paper, it looked like a dream solution. Even the construction was designed to impress. The project's skyway alone would require nearly 1,600 precast concrete deck segments, each one lifted and locked into place like a giant jigsaw puzzle stretching over Footscray. But here was the problem. To deliver this vision, engineers would have to dig deeper and wider than almost any road tunnel Australia had ever attempted. And nobody knew what was waiting in the ground below. So how do you dig tunnels this massive under a living city? And what kind of machines does it take? The answer came in the form of 2 giants. Their names were Bella and Vita. 2 tunnel boring machines so massive they redefined Australian engineering. Each one was built by Herrenknecht in Germany. Each one stood 15.6 meters in diameter. Each stretched an incredible 90 meters long. And each weighed a staggering 4,000 tons. Powered by 8,400 kilowatts, they delivered 68,291 kilonewton meters of torque. Imagine standing next to one. taller than a 5-story building, longer than a football field is wide, grinding through rock and clay with the force of a small power plant. After delays, Bella and Vida finally began cutting in 2022. Month after month, they chewed through the earth beneath Melbourne's west, carving the twin tunnels that would carry thousands of cars and trucks every day. Then came the surprise. By 2023, both machines broke through ahead of schedule. Vida in February, Bella in May. Workers celebrated. Politicians posed for cameras. Everyone thought the hardest part was done. It was like drilling a perfect hole through a mountain with a machine the size of a skyscraper tipped on its side. But this mountain wasn't in the wilderness, it was under a living city. And the hole had to be flawless. Above ground, a 116-meter launching gantry, weighing 1,200 tons, was busy assembling the Skyway, stitching those 1,600 deck segments together like a giant puzzle. But just when everything seemed on track, workers hit something in the soil. Something that would bring the entire project to a standstill. What exactly did they find? The discovery was hidden in the spoil, the dirt and rock that Bella and Vida carved out of the earth. At first it looked like ordinary soil, but tests revealed something terrifying. Around 1.5 million cubic meters of it was contaminated with PFAS, per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, known as the forever chemicals. Why that name? Because they don't break down in the environment, and they don't break down in the human body. They stay, they linger, they poison. PFAS has been linked to cancer, to liver damage, to immune system harm, even to development issues in children. And now Melbourne had enough of it to fill 600 Olympic swimming pools, with nowhere safe to put it. The project froze overnight. Bella and Vida, those unstoppable giants, sat idle in darkness. No landfill in Victoria was approved to take PFAS-laced spoil on this scale. And without a disposal plan, nothing could move. But this wasn't just a construction headache. It was a health crisis, a legal minefield, a political bomb, and the clock was ticking on a project already behind schedule. Workers were sent home, contractors bled millions, and the same communities promised relief from truck convoys now faced a darker fear. Toxic soil stockpiled in their backyards. It was like renovating your house and discovering the walls filled with asbestos. But this wasn't a house. It was a multi-billion-dollar tunnel, and walking away was not an option. With toxic spoil piling up and no solution in sight, what happened next? And how long could the project stay frozen? For months, the Westgate tunnel site sat in silence. A stalemate, a half-built project frozen in place. Bleeding money, boiling with public anger. Hundreds of workers were stood down. The tunnel boring machines sat motionless deep underground. Meanwhile, the Victorian government scrambled for answers. They needed a landfill willing to accept 1.5 million cubic meters of PFAS-contaminated spoil. But where could it go? For the communities of Bulla, Bacchus Marsh, and Ravenhall, the message felt insulting. Your neighborhoods aren't good enough to live near a tunnel, but they're good enough to dump its poison. Proposed disposal sites triggered fierce resistance. Residents protested in the streets. Scientists raised alarms about public health. Local councils sued, demanding the waste be kept away. The project meant to fix traffic gridlock had become a war over toxic accountability. And while politicians argued, contractors watched their budgets explode. Every idle day cost millions. Every delay pushed the opening further into the future. The real question was no longer where do we put the spoil. It was who pays for this disaster. And who gets poisoned in the process? Imagine being told your street would host a toxic waste dump. Not for your benefit, but to save a project that was supposed to make your life better. That was the brutal choice facing Melbourne's West. With communities in revolt and contractors bleeding cash, who finally broke the stalemate? And at what cost? The breakthrough, if you can call it that, came from the Environmental Protection Authority, the EPA. To get the tunnel moving again, the EPA fast-tracked approvals for multiple disposal sites. One of them was High Quality's Bulla facility. On paper, it looked like progress. But in May 2022, the Victorian Ombudsman released a damning report. It revealed the EPA, under political pressure, had cut corners. They failed to properly consider community rights. They bypassed normal approval processes. In plain words, to save the tunnel, the government threw procedural fairness out the window. Communities weren't consulted, they were steamrolled. The result, lawsuits multiplied. Blame ricocheted between Transurban, the government, the EPA, and the construction joint venture, CPB contractors and John Holland. What started as an engineering project had transformed. It was now a political scandal, a legal minefield, a public relations nightmare, and all of it rolled into one. Trust in the project was shattered. Every headline screamed the same words. Broken promises, toxic cover-ups, communities sacrificed for a tunnel that might never open. It was like a game of hot potato, except the potato wasn't harmless. It was 1.5 million cubic meters of poisoned dirt, and nobody wanted to hold it. With the legal battles raging and public trust destroyed, how much did it cost to finally get the project moving again? The answer came in a bitter settlement reached between 2021 and 2022. And the price tag was staggering. Taxpayers were forced to add 1.9 billion Australian dollars. Transurban contributed another 2.2 billion Australian dollars. And the CPB John Holland joint venture gave up all of its profit just to keep the project alive. The original $5.5 billion promise had now exploded. The tunnel's total cost was heading toward $11 to $12 billion, almost double. And Melbourne commuters would still be paying tolls until 2045. Politicians tried to spin it. They called it getting the project back on track. But the public saw the truth. This was a massive financial blowout, caused by toxic soil no one had tested for before digging even began. Even with all that extra money, there was no guarantee. No guarantee the tunnel would open on time. No guarantee the 20-minute travel savings would ever appear. The Westgate Tunnel had become a case study in failure. Ballooning budgets, poisoned communities, a government scrambling to salvage credibility. Imagine hiring a contractor to renovate your kitchen. The deal was $50,000. Then halfway through they say, actually we found asbestos. Now it's $100,000. And by the way, you're paying half. That's what Melbourne faced. And the worst part, even after pouring in billions, no one could say if the nightmare was over. But even with all this money on the table, could engineers actually finish this cursed project? Or would more disasters still lie ahead? Despite the poison, the politics, and the public outrage, construction crews kept working. At this stage, abandoning the project meant wasting everything already spent. The 116-meter, 1,200-ton launching gantry kept lifting and placing the 1,600 precast deck segments, one by one, forming the elevated skyway over Footscray Road. For workers, it wasn't about budgets or headlines. It was about finishing what they started, proving Melbourne's West deserved world-class infrastructure too. Inside the tunnels, fit-out work began. Ventilation, fire systems, wiring, lighting, sensors. And at the portals, something unexpected appeared. 38-meter-high timber eelnet structures, inspired by Aboriginal heritage. A reminder of the land's first custodians. It was like decorating a house after a fire. Beautiful touches over scars that still remained. But with the spoil gone and the tunnels carved, how close was the project to finally opening? And could it meet its latest deadline? By September 2025, the tunnels were fully dug. The skyway was almost finished. And the government promised one thing: opening by the end of 2025. Final freeway connections were tied in. Ventilation systems were tested. Every light, sensor, and safety system went through commissioning. But for Melburnians, doubt ran deep. Too many broken deadlines. Too many cost blowouts. Too many empty promises. Still, the evidence stood tall. The tunnels existed. The skyway stood strong. The second Maribyrnong crossing was finally visible. Government updates spoke of final road closures and endgame commissioning. This wasn't talk of another delay. This was the language of a project nearing completion. But one question remained. Would it really deliver those 20-minute travel savings? Or simply shift congestion into new bottlenecks? It was like waiting for a delayed flight. You see the plane taxi, you see the crew board, but you don't believe it's real until you're in the air. So after a decade of delays, billions in overruns, and toxic scandals, what's the final verdict? Was the Westgate Tunnel worth it? After a decade of delays, billions in blowouts, and toxic revelations, the Westgate Tunnel stands as both achievement and warning. Yes, it may deliver faster commutes and take 9,000 trucks off city streets. But its true legacy is the scar beneath Melbourne, the reminder that progress often hides a poisoned cost. This tunnel isn't just concrete and steel. It's a symbol of political shortcuts, forgotten communities, and buried secrets dragged into the light. And the question remains, was shaving 20 minutes of traffic worth inheriting a century of toxic soil? The Westgate Tunnel proves that engineering brilliance cannot fix political failure. You can deploy 4,000-ton machines, lift 1,600 concrete segments, and carve tunnels beneath a city. But if you ignore the ground beneath, bypass the people above, and gamble with poisoned soil, the project collapses under its own weight. The legacy isn't just a road, it's a warning. Progress without accountability always leaves a scar. From the 2014 pitch to the 2025 opening, the Westgate Tunnel became a saga of ambition, engineering, and scandal. You've just uncovered the truth. Poisoned soil, community revolts, and a cost that nearly doubled. If this story opened your eyes, like the video, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more controversial mega projects worldwide. So tell us, was it worth it, or a mistake Australia will regret?